Hey, my name's Patrick Kirnan. I'm a New Jersey native who lives in Spring Lake, New Jersey. Um, Want to thank Roots of Us LLC for taking the time to interview me and hear my story. Uh, I've been a New Jersey resident for most of my life. I grew up in Pennington, then I moved down to the shore in the Spring Lake area. And after a few years of living in Los Angeles and working out there, I decided to come back, and I am back at the shore once more. I'm 27 years old. I do a few things. This fall, I will be a law student at the Seton University, and between now and then, I'm saving up, doing some restaurant work, and also driving for Lyft. My medical history is probably more psychological than it would be physical. For most of my life, I've dealt with some degree of depression and anxiety, and I have found that cannabis is a effective way for me to maintain a balance in my life and medicate. In truth, I'm not a big fan of prescription medication. I'm very weary to take painkillers or antidepressants. I find that the side effects are, at least for me, not worth uh, the benefits. So I have pursued a different, medical treatment, which has largely been through self-medication with marijuana. I think the first time I learned about medical cannabis was late high school, maybe early college. I had a few friends that were either from California or knew people in California, and they had famously, passed a proposition in the 90s which allowed for medical use. So maybe when I was about 19 or 20. Yeah, for me, I felt an immediate gravitation towards the substance, even at an early age. I think I associated with some of the counterculture and the social history that surrounded the substance. So there's a degree of curiosity, but upon discovering it for myself and trying it, I felt that I had a degree of clarity mentally and some stability that I think was missing in my life. So I kind of leaned on it as a means of creating balance. Specifically, I find that cannabis helps me to actually concentrate and focus. This may be startling to some, as some users may experience couch lock or some other side effect, but for me, I have high energy and I think high brain energy at times, so the ability to kind of use cannabis allows me to narrow in on a task or a given piece of work. So I find myself lucid, a little bit more clear in the head. And the benefit as well is with some of the depression and anxiety that I feel, those feelings dissipate when I use cannabis. Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a general stigma that's very negative with marijuana. People think that you're a lazy stoner and you're not able to do your work. So I think my family and my coworkers probably didn't know to the extent that I was using cannabis. And ironically, I was doing well in school, getting good grades, staying on track. So for them, it might have been a bit of a surprise to see, wow, this substance use, with cannabis is finding a way to integrate itself to a successful young man. However, there is just a general stigma and I think a worry that my parents probably felt with the idea of, is this a slippery slope? Is this a gateway drug? Um, but after conversations and really kind of opening up about what my use was, those worries kind of went away. Yeah, so when I was 23 years old, I finished a graduate program in television and film, and I knew that I wanted to work in Los Angeles, California. Having previously been arrested for cannabis possession in New Jersey, I was very fearful that I would run into um, some other type of legal trouble, and that kind of allowed me to pursue California and its more lenient medical laws as a way to both secure work but also maintain a healthy relationship with cannabis without fear of violating some type of law or a run-in with law enforcement. So when I was out there in 2014, I made an appointment with a local doctor. We spoke about some of the issues that I felt I had and how cannabis had helped me throughout my college career stay focused and deal with depression and anxiety. So after that appointment, I was prescribed a medical card and was able to shop at the local dispensaries in Los Angeles County. And it was pretty easy, to be completely honest. It was a little startling coming from the East Coast, but once you kind of got in the doors and realized what the scene was, there are people there for all different kinds of reasons. So people with chronic pain, people with serious illnesses, folks like me who were suffering from anxiety and depression, and all of us found, a benefit with having that medical card. Yeah, since moving back to New Jersey, I have not been utilizing cannabis to the extent that I was when living in California. However, with the recent executive order to allow for medicinal prescriptions for folks, suffering from anxiety and depression, I intend to pursue getting a medical card here in New Jersey, and I'm excited to see how it compares to, the experience in California. Yeah, one of the things that does frustrate me is I'm currently a resident of Monmouth County, and the freeholders have voted that they do not want to really have a dispensary or have a medicinal presence, let alone a recreational presence. So I do think this is a bit of a hurdle for patients, doctors, and growers and folks who would be working at the dispensary, is this limited number of locations, and knowing that you're probably going to have to drive a little farther than the CVS to get your medicine. Yeah. So when I was 19 years old, I was a freshman in college, and I came home for winter break, and I was arrested for possession and paraphernalia of marijuana. Unfortunately, this was a bad experience for a number of reasons. Going through the legal hoops, the fees that came with that, and really just the stigma of being arrested, having to have that conversation with your parents. It didn't help the depression and anxiety that I had already been carrying, and it actually kind of doubled down some of those feelings. And unfortunately, as a result, I kind of felt a little trapped because I knew I was young and I was in college. I was going to continue using cannabis, but it felt like there was this shadow kind of hanging over my head with this fear that at any moment I might run into trouble again, which would effectively violate my probation and put me in a worser situation, which would effectively have an impact on my employment, potentially my standing at the university I was attending. So I did have a run-in with the law. It wasn't the greatest, but it has helped me really determine what I think should be the future for cannabis use, and has made me more of an advocate for sensible reform. Yeah, the medical versus recreational use of cannabis is a serious debate with pros and cons on each side. Personally speaking, I think that medical should be a lot more open to the public. I think there's a number of reasons in which a patient might find cannabis use or prescription for a medical marijuana card to be beneficial to their treatment. In New Jersey, we hear every day, dozens of folks are dealing with opioid overdose, and there really is an epidemic right now with prescription drugs. So personally speaking, as someone who's benefited from being a card holder in the cannabis scene, I think that medically speaking, we should really open up the gates to allow people that opportunity. Recreationally speaking, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think there's a lot more stigma and concern as to how marijuana, especially in the age of vaping, is going to kind of find its way into the youth. But I think that's a conversation that we really have to have, and there's a lot of benefits to allowing recreational use. There's a lot of people that are abusing other substances that have more of a negative impact on themselves, their family members, and the community around them. Simply speaking, you can't overdose from marijuana. And so I do know people that have overdosed from alcohol. So. Yeah, I guess just I'll talk about maybe kind of how I want to integrate the law school education. Yeah. So this fall, I'm going to be starting law school at the Seton University of Law in Newark, New Jersey. And one of the things that I hope to take advantage during my education there is find a way to network and further pursue and advocate for sensible cannabis reform. I think that once you find yourself in a negative legal situation, it can really be a downward spiral or a feedback loop that kind of exacerbates the situation, whether you have trouble with your student loans or difficulty gaining employment. So the time for sensible reform is now. We'll take it one step at a time, but it's important that we declassify cannabis as a Schedule I dangerous substance, and we start researching what its impact is in society, how it can help patients, and most importantly, it's imperative that folks who are serving time for cannabis related charges, especially nonviolent possession charges, that these folks have their sentences looked at again, and an opportunity to re-enter society in a positive light, as opposed to continue serving time while a few dispensaries open up and people are making money doing the same thing. And I'd like to take the time to say thank you to Roots of Us LLC for coming out and interviewing me and hearing my story. I look forward to hearing some of the other stories as well.